afternoon, good evening from wherever you're joining us today. Thanks a million for joining today's session by Quantcast on content or clickbait, hosted by Summer here. I know it's day two, so you're probably all familiar with the platform. Just a really quick run through. If you want to engage with the discussion that Summer is having here, you can use the chat box. If you want to ask a specific question to Summer, you can use the Q&A tab on the right-hand side of the platform, and we'll get around to those questions towards the end of the session. And then at the end of the session, if you want to learn more about the company and connect further with the team, you can click on the info tab there on the left. So without further ado, I'll let Summer kick off and enjoy the session. Thanks.
Excellent. Thanks, Pat. Hi, everybody. I'm Summer Simpson, and I am fortunate enough to lead a incredibly talented and tenacious team of product managers and designers at Quantcast. So today, no slides. I think all of us over the past year have had enough of virtual meetings and slides, so I'm going to chat. Today we're going to talk about one of my favorite subjects, which is digital journalism. Within the context of the free and open internet, and kind of talk a bit about how we got to where we are today, because where we are is incredibly interesting. But before we go there, let me just kind of give a little background on myself and tell you why I care so much about digital journalism. I grew up loving technology. I started coding when I was 11 because there's just something incredibly magical in how seemingly random letters and numbers could make things happen on a screen. And I really also loved to irritate my sixth grade teacher with some basic loop programs on our Commodore 64 in the classroom. I also come from a journalism background. From an early age, I was very much obsessed with the idea of the fourth estate. I ran an underground newspaper in high school. I launched a music and arts magazine in college. Went to photojournalism school, and then built my newspaper's first website in '94, and then kind of never looked back. Just went digital. So free and open access to news and information it's really in my blood, and it's the thing that kind of fuels me. Being able to leverage technology to expand and protect the impact of journalism is pretty much why I wake up every morning and go to work. But while the internet is a place for the open expression of ideas, we kind of need to start by first establishing a fundamental truth. So the content that you consume on the internet, the content that people rely on to be informed, is paid for by advertising. So there are other models out there. There's subscription-based and affiliate models and that sort of thing, but for the most part, it is advertising based. If you look at the majority of the content out there, the articles that we stumble on, through the rabbit hole of search and social, news sites who cover everything from global, national, local news to sports and entertainment that basically educate and inform us, even hobbyist sites, that entertain us and help us, do it ourselves, and larger platforms like Facebook, that feed our digital social needs. They're all available to us because of the ad ecosystem that we, as tech companies and consumers, marketers and publishers, that this is the thing that we've created, right? So what I want to do is take a quick walk through history, and for me, kind of like a path down memory lane. So digital journalism did not start in the 90s. A lot of people think it did. But really the first content that made it to the internet for people who had a computer and a dial-up connection was through an experiment that was run by CompuServe with the Associated Press. So the Columbus Dispatch was the first to provide their content on this service, followed then very quickly by the New York Times, the San Francisco Chronicle, the San Francisco Examiner, if anybody remembers them, the Washington Post, and many others. In the 90s, digital journalism was beginning to take off, and a lot of it had to do with this cool new thing called the World Wide Web, also with the availability of faster modems, and then a little browser called Netscape. So print media was getting online at lightning speed, and the ease of web publishing increased this proliferation of online digizines like Word and Salon, and my own personal favorite, Suck. Then by the turn of the century, every major print publication was online, and many were already producing sort of net new content that was only available digitally, which was pushing the envelope in terms of leveraging technology to generate and present content to this growing online mass of people. So all this content online made it increasingly difficult to find things unless you knew the web address. So Yahoo came in and fixed this with a categorized and curated directory of websites and a news section that aggregated content from wire services and a lot of publisher partners. Yahoo News very quickly became the most emailed page on the web, and it really revolutionized the way we consume news media, which ushered in a whole new era of news aggregation. But the world really changed once Google won the search engine race. And what was a search tool became the way that people literally navigated the web. And it also eventually became a whole new verb in our lexicon. Google News launched in beta in 2002, and then really officially in 2006. But behind the scenes, there was a lot of noise. There were a lot of lawsuits. And this mostly stemmed from the fact that, publishers were worried, as they should have been, and complained that Google was using their content, their headlines, their leads, their photos, without their permission and without a way to drive revenue for the content creators. Visits to news sites from Google News and from Google Search in general kind of became known in the industry as Google one-hit wonders, right? Since these were single visits, people saw something on Google News, they popped in, they read the article, and they left, right? So really hard to monetize that kind of traffic. But at the same time, it's really hard to turn down that traffic. So a lot of lawsuits were dropped, and the World Wide Web just kind of continued to turn. Now, this was the early days of what would become a very long addiction for publishers to this kind of traffic. So seeing the growth of news and the potential to make money, more and more content sites started to pop up. But while bigger sites could hire internal sales teams, smaller sites couldn't afford the overhead of that and weren't large enough for brands to really buy ad space on, because brands need scale. This allowed at first for the rise of ad networks. So small sites could partner with a middleman who brought on thousands of sites, bundled them categorically, and then resold them to larger brands so that the brands could get that scale that they were looking for. But this had limitations in that all audiences were kind of treated equally, right? So, while some ad networks had optimization technologies that personalized ads, it was still pretty primitive and still lacked that scale. And this meant basically that someone who visited New York Times was valued the same as someone who visited a niche blog or a much smaller publisher site. Now, to sell audiences, you need to scale. And to get scale, you need to have one place for publishers to sell their ad space. So programmatic was born, right? It's an auction-based marketplace to sell website inventory. And this was done out of solving this problem, right? It was done for good. So this was a huge change because publishers could suddenly monetize their inventory automatically, and their content and audience segments were valued differently. And marketers could find their desired audience at scale across hundreds of publishers. Now, the short period of time from 2005 through 2007 was a kind of a flurry of content production and clicking. We'll get there. We saw two pretty major areas of rapid growth. Blogs, which had actually been around since the late 90s. People using platforms like LiveJournal and Blogger, but it didn't really take off until WordPress caught on with the masses in 2005. And then you saw a little bit of a hockey stick. It was a format that allowed anyone to spin up a website and post content on a regular basis. So bloggers began to take on news stories, right, as it grew, as they looked for things to write about. And while some of those bloggers were former journalists, many more were fans. They were, experts in a particular area, or just kind of regular Joes. And we started to see a lot more injection of personal beliefs into their news stories. And without the journalism norms of, things like fact checking or multiple editorial reviews, having multiple sources, we kind of began to see the proliferation of content that used to be reserved for the op-ed pages. And with the ease of creating generalized or republished content, combined with the ease of monetizing it, a whole new wave of sites emerged. Now, the superpowers of these sites were around search and social. So leveraging SEO and social sharing to drive traffic to their sites. And then once people were there, constructing headlines paired with images that drove engagement through the roof. So websites, and there were lots of them, but as an example, websites like Huffington Post and BuzzFeed were launched, and they perfected this sort of attention-grabbing content presentation and this proverbial rabbit hole. So this was all well and good, of course, until tech figured out how to turn traffic into cash. And encouraging this trend were tech companies like Taboola and Outbrain, who created widgets that displayed, similar content, but maybe from questionable sources that, other content producers could add to their own sites as an ad unit, right? So this monetization strategy. These are lovingly referred to as chumbox ads. And it created yet another monetization strategy, but really one that encouraged bad habits. So people would click these article links and they'd suddenly find themselves on an unrecognizable website, clicking through, page after page. Everybody's seen it, right? Click to the next page. You'll get to the answer eventually. And people really wondered, would they ever get to the point? But what this did was it really produced the cha-ching sounds with every single click that occurred, right? Because each stage was monetized. Now, during the same period, social was really on the rise. As a major fan of tribe.net and a very often frequent complainer about MySpace, I can firmly state that Facebook was not the first social network, but it obviously did emerge the victor. In 2006, Facebook opened its doors to anyone 13 years or older with an email address, which enabled thousands of people in the US to join a user base of what had been college students. And these folks come in, create their own social networks through friend invites, and keep people entertained through pet and kid posts. Now, a key piece of Facebook was, of their success was the launch of the Facebook newsfeed, which created a stream of endless content that was likable and shareable. Now, a quickly growing software company needs to monetize the bills. And what better way to grow revenue than to tap into all that social profile data and make it available for advertisers to target consumers directly, knowing exactly who people are and what they like. So in 2007, Facebook Ads was launched, and the first ads appeared in our news feeds. Facebook hit a major milestone just 3 years later, reaching 500 million users. That's 500 million people spending more and more time every day, now on their smartphones, first thing in the morning, running through your newsfeed, reading their friend updates, and sharing content on the newsfeed. That's 500 million people now also seeing ads in that newsfeed. So fast forward 6 years, when Facebook got when Facebook got the world and the EU's attention in 2013 with the Cambridge Analytics scandal, which is something that exposed the social data of 87 million Facebook users. Now, Facebook was not the only tech giant under the microscope of privacy advocates, but we'll get to that in a little bit later. Kind of the point that I have here, in terms of the social thread in this brief history is more one of social bubbles. So the more time people spent on Facebook getting their news and information, the more time they spent surrounded by people that they liked and agreed with, which separated them from alternative views and the reality outside their bubbles within the walled gardens. So I think many of you have seen this chart of media bias, right? Where it's a spectrum, right? It shows where each major news outlet falls on a conservative to liberal spectrum. Now, the placement of those logos looks far different today than it did in 2007. In 2007, it looked more like a bell curve, more in the middle, fewer out on the sides. There are way more on that graph now, and there are a lot fewer in the middle. Things have gone out to the sides. A lot of this was fueled by the fast-growing internet economy and the tech factors that spurred that exponential growth. Now, people find comfort in their own echo chamber. It confirms what they already believe, And since revenue makes the world go round, publications quickly followed the people and the resulting division. So no matter where we fall on that spectrum in terms of our own views, and even how hard we try to stick to the middle, there are moments that we all kind of fall prey to this. And all of this, the real news sources, the quality journalism that values balance and ethics, have been getting squeezed. $129 billion was spent in 2019 in the US alone. That's marketing dollars. All that marketing spend is mostly going to the search and social tech giants, with the remainder of that spend spread across that graph that I just talked about, right? With the tech companies that power the ecosystem that help them monetize taking their own shares as well. So this leaves the producers of quality content and journalism with very little left to actually run the business that produces the content that we all consume every day. Add in privacy law requirements, the impending death of the third-party cookie that everybody's talking about, and you've got a recipe for further control by the tech giants over the content, the revenue, and the futures of these news sources, regardless of what side of the spectrum they fall on. So welcome to today, right? Where we're now in a place where the news is as divided as our political parties. Or some might think maybe our political parties are as divided as our news. So people live in these protected information bubbles, only hearing the information that they and their friends agree with. Facebook and Google are further cutting publishers out or controlling the flow of ad dollars around the publisher content. And big tech, with their history of questionable data and privacy practices that have made major headlines over the past 10 years, are being sought after by governments globally. But the GDPR, CCPA, and other privacy laws that were intended as a means to ensnare those big fish and hold them accountable has instead been sort of like this widely cast net that has actually ensnared all of us, making revenue even more difficult to generate and content to produce. So the question is, what now? Hang on. So, are we so divided and that we're stuck in these bubbles forever? Will the death of third-party cookie drive us back to the monetization strategies of 1999? Now, as someone who lived through 1999 and was a part of that advertising experience, I can say that experience for marketers, publishers, and consumers alike back in 1999 was just frankly awful. So the big question is, are we doomed? Absolutely not. I believe that we can learn from the past and we can create a new future, one that is privacy-centric and rewards quality digital journalism. And here's how we do it, right? So let's start with marketers. Marketers can demand transparency across the ecosystem for your spend, right? Understand where it's going, who's cutting what out of where, and what is ultimately getting to the publisher. Secondly, put down the brand safety sledgehammers, right? The ones that you're using today, and find more precise tools that help you achieve your goals, right? So to protect your brand, but also don't miss out on, the impressions and the clicks and the conversions that make up your goals. And most importantly, spend in ways that match your brand beliefs. Like, choosing to support quality digital journalism with your ad dollars, or making an extra effort to support those quality publications that are POC and woman-owned and operated. Now, for publishers, there's a lot of opportunity right now, right? Partner with fewer supply partners and only those who are committed to transparency, privacy compliance, and control, giving you control, right? Partner with technology partners that have your best interest at heart, and industry bodies, more importantly, who help protect and grow your revenue after the third-party cookie. And then lastly, cooperate with other publishers. I think there is value in the village, right, rather than the individual. And any way that you can cooperate with other publishers and technology providers to solve problems together and really reestablish your rightful place at the table within this digital democracy at scale. So I've outlined the past, and I've kind of covered the present a little bit, but the big question again is, what's the future? We need to be ready for a world beyond cookies. But rather than seeing this as doomsday, maybe we view this as an opportunity to embrace positive change. So let's get back to basics, right? We can party like it's 1999, but let's not advertise like it's 1999. Let's bring balance by putting the consumer at the center, because this is a three-sided ecosystem, not two. We as consumers, because we all are, not only have a right to expect the ad tech ecosystem to have integrity and accountability, but also to innovate with new ways of delivering personalized advertising content, because that has value, right? That increases my experience as a consumer to have advertising that, is relevant to me, but not too creepy. We need people to innovate this personalized advertising content and have that be built on consumer privacy and data protection. So Quantcast, we don't believe there's a one-size-fits-all solution to identity. And that's why, in addition to kind of innovating on our own identity solution and really trying to deeply understand this problem that we're all facing, we're also participating in cross-industry initiatives such as the IAB Tech Labs Project Rearc and working with the W3C. There's a number of them out there. I would recommend that people get involved in those as well. The more balanced representation that we have in these industry bodies, the more likely we're going to get to a solution that works for everyone. So we have chosen to interoperate with the emerging industry solutions, things like UID2, potentially Swan, that's one to watch. There's a number of others. Interoperate with those as they become available, and if they meet the standards that we hold for consumer privacy. It's important. So, building new identity solutions, as well as educating consumers on their data rights, is going to require a lot of time. It's going to require a lot of investment and effort. But it's time well spent, so that consumers understand that they too can influence the future of the free and open internet. Because honestly, as consumers, it's ours, right? And as an industry, this is the path forward to building long-lasting solutions that consumers can trust. So let's come back to that hard truth that I started with earlier. The internet of today, it's paid for by advertising. That means that a free press is not free. And we all have a part to play in this. And as consumers, I think that we have the most important role. We as consumers, just like everyone else, should support quality digital journalism outside the walled gardens. We need to support the brands that spend their marketing dollars to power that quality digital journalism. And we need to look very closely and understand our own data rights on platforms like iOS, Facebook, Google, Amazon, pretty much everywhere. We need to understand what's going on, and we need to make that choice on what we're comfortable with. And then, support the vision of a vibrant, free, and open internet, and help ensure we don't end up with a socioeconomic divide between those who have access to information and those who don't. And most importantly, remember, freedom requires a free press. All right, so that's enough of me talking. Let's open it up for some questions.
Okay, thanks a million, Summer. Super engaging chat. Great to go free form without the slides as well. So good stuff. A lot of people engaged in the chat here as well. We've got two direct questions that I'm going to put up on screen here, and we actually just got a third in, which is great. So do feel free to keep them coming in with the Q&A tab. First off, from Paula Costa. Hey, Summer, will consumers continue to jump for the next big internet social media platform once it gets momentum? So I guess it's a question maybe about future-proofing and staying ahead of the curve.
We've seen this over the past 20, 25 years. Dating myself a lot here, but it's the way the world turns, right? People age. I have an 18-year-old daughter who doesn't touch Facebook. She'll use Instagram and she'll use TikTok, but Facebook's done, right? Which is why I think a lot of these social companies are doing acquisitions of these other new companies in order to maintain the younger audiences and remain relevant.
Great, thank you. Next question here is super relevant. I contribute to many Patreon accounts, as well as watch content and consume content on Twitch. So Jenna Heyman asks, what do you think of the shifting focus from company to the individual that seems to be happening on newer media such as TikTok, Twitch, and subscription platforms like Patreon?
So I'm not 100% sure I understand the question. I'm going to make a guess though. So this is more in terms of people engaging with the site and having a one-on-one relationship with the site. Is that this is more like expansion of more and more walled gardens, right?
Yeah, I'd imagine maybe it's something to do with supporting maybe independent-led content creators over kind of more established companies, but again, I'm not too sure.
Sorry, maybe we can follow up on that one.
Yeah, we'll get back to that
now. I'm happy to chat on that one.
Yeah, exactly. A question here from what's your opinion of FLOC, which I don't know what it is, so if you could explain it first, that'd be fantastic.
Okay, so Flock is Google's proposal for a post third-party cookie world in a way that allows you to target cohorts of users. So it's instead of being very individualistic, they are grouping collections of what would have been cookies together, right? To give advertisers the ability to reach more privacy-centric audiences. I don't have an opinion yet. It's kind of a wait and see. I know that right now it's only available in the U.S. for people to get an early view into Flock and begin to start kind of engaging with it. My team is doing that. So for me, again, whatever's going to work, right? I don't think that there's going to be any single identity solution that is going to solve everything for everybody across the web. People are going to have their preferences. There are going to be, some that rise to the surface. We're looking at how do we interoperate with as many as possible. Flock could be one of those. But it is one to watch for sure.
Okay, fantastic. We'll get one more question in here before the hour is up. And this one comes from Travis Kane. Where do you see journalism fitting into a more privatized social media push within kind of text, WhatsApp, etc.?
That sounds like a really hard job for a journalist. That's a long way from just dropping some papers in a box for people to come by and pick up for 25 cents. I don't know. The value of journalism is reaching the masses with the information necessary to help them make decisions about their lives, their governments, and the world. So I think that publishers are going to have to explore every possible channel to get that information out there. The trick is going to be making sure that they get the credit and they get the monetization that they deserve for that content.
Brilliant, thanks for that. The hour is up now, but what I will say is, there's a lot of engaged chat going on in the chat box here. So what I would recommend anybody who enjoyed Summer's talk would be to connect further with the Quantcast team. You can search them in the Explore section under Partners or through the info tab there. But Summer, super engaging presentation, and thanks a million for that. As I said, anybody who wants to engage further with the Quantcast can do so via the info tab. Thanks a million for joining, and we'll see you soon at the event.
Great. Thank you.